Well, thanks everyone for joining me. It's Nick from Open Door Coaching. Not calling. Sorry, I've got my usual pre-recorded voice on there. But anyway, it's Nick from Open Door Coaching. Thanks for joining us today for the Coaching Cafe webinar. And today we're looking at targeting questions to different personality types. This is a topic that I've presented a little while ago, and I went through the PowerPoint again earlier this week, and it's actually really pertinent at the moment, I think, in terms of how we communicate with people and looking at how we actually adapt our questions when we're coaching to different personality types and different not behavioral preferences, communication preferences. So we're going to have a look at that today. There's a lot of content today, so we might run a little bit over our half an hour, but let's see how we go. Let's see how we go. I had this slide up before. It's just a little reminder that we have a new program here at Open Door Coaching, which is a mental health first aid course. It is a accredited course through Mental Health First Aid Australia. And this course has been really popular actually with our clients because it tends to be the people who are working with people, leaders, managers, coaches, etc. And this skill set around identifying and supporting people experiencing mental health issues is a really key one. People often say that they don't quite know what they should do if they have that kind of feeling. And so the mental health first aid course actually slots right into that sort of zone, into that sort of scenario. It gives you those skills. This is something that we run public programs on, but also that we can come in-house and deliver for you. So if you've got questions about that, feel free to let me know or send me an email. All right, so today we're going to cover personality preferences. We're going to look at what they are, and we're going to use that the system called DISC. It's a psychometric tool. You're probably familiar with it. It's a DISC-based model. DISC Advanced is the particular one. We're going to have a look at each particular style's preferences, and then we can look at how we're going to use this when we're coaching. Let me know in the chat box if you've used DISC before or if you're familiar with DISC. Would be good to know. Helps me just contextualize a little bit what I'm going to say. All right, but before we go on, very important, I need you to choose one of these two things that's on the screen, Vegemite or peanut butter. Just need you to choose which one it is. Just choose one. Yeah, just choose one. And remember which one you've chosen. If you want to put it into the chat box, you certainly can. You don't have to, but just choose one of these and we're going to come back to that. I promise we'll come back to it. All will be revealed. So as I said before, we're going to have a look at DISC Advanced. It's a really great tool actually. If we're going to use DISC, this is the one that I would recommend that we use. People are saying Vegemite, of course Vegemite. Oh, peanut butter, okay. Controversial there, Gillian, but that's okay. We'll come back. It's a bit of fun. So we're going to use DISC Advanced. DISC has four main types of personality or communication preferences in it. We're going to have a look at those and then apply what we learn from that into the coaching that we're doing. So when we talk about behavior, why isn't behavior so important? Why is it so important when we're dealing with people, when we're working with people? And for me, it's really the second point here that's highly observable. It's all we actually can see. So all we can really see when we're observing somebody, when we're looking at them or we're listening to what they're saying or we're reading what they're writing or whatever it is, that's all behavior. And it's the only thing that we can really reliably see about a person. We can't see what they're thinking. We can't see where the behavior comes from or anything like that. So behavior is super important. And this is important for us observing someone's behavior, but also having behaviors of our own. How do we behave? How do we communicate with people? And everyone's got a particular style, everyone's got a particular unique style. So although DISC has four types in it, within that, people will have a mixture of the four different types. Everyone's quite unique. It's very quite unique. And the last point on this slide, which I think is particularly pertinent, is we're often judged by our behavior. And that's regardless of our profession, the situation, the context, but often we're judged on behavior, how we behave, how we show up. And that is because it is so observable. It is such a observable thing. Think about people in your workplace now, how they're behaving today. You've probably made a decision about that. Sometimes you might say, oh, this person seems angry, or this person seems frustrated, or this person seems happy. You're making those decisions based on their behavior. So behavior is super important, and DISC is a behavioral preferences tool, and it fits in very nicely with communication preference too. So, okay, so cool. So Nikki, you've used DISC before. Cool, no problems. All right, so behavior is definitely the tip of the iceberg. I really like this iceberg diagram because the waterline there, what's above the waterline here is what we can observe. And I think this is behavior largely. It's mostly behavior. What sits underneath the iceberg, which of course is a lot bigger than what we can observe, is all the stuff that leads to that behavior. So what people are feeling, what they're thinking, what their beliefs are, what their attitudes are, what their experiences are, all of that sort of stuff supports the outward projection that we see, which is people's behavior. So this is a real cue for us to sort of go, okay, I'm making a decision about the person's behavior. What am I basing that on? And usually we're basing it on our own thoughts about that person as opposed to what's actually under the waterline. And the only way we can really work that out is by asking the person. I really like the iceberg. I think it's really, really cool. And if we were to draw this as a person and we were to say, okay, the stuff above the waterline is their behavior, and everything below the waterline that explains their behavior is our stuff, it wouldn't make sense. It just wouldn't make sense. But this is what we do, right? We tend to kind of decide what's going on for them based on what we think is going on, as opposed to asking them what is actually going on, which is the bottom half of that iceberg. Now, I saw this quote when I was putting this together, and I don't have a reference for you. It's an internet quote that I found somewhere, and I should have had a reference, but it's not my own work. And it is that more people fail because of behaviour than fail due to lack of knowledge or technical expertise. Yeah? So they fail because of behavior. And behavior, we need to expand out a little bit. It's not just sort of like, oh, that person's behaving badly. It's the things that people do. Yeah, the things that people do, or the things that people don't do. So behavior is not just, we tend to think about it like as, kids, or kids are badly behaved, or that person's badly behaved. It's not just that kind of behavior we're talking about. It's what they do, how they do it, and what they don't do. Okay, does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. I presented this a bit, and sometimes things make a lot of sense to me, but may not to you. So please let me know if it doesn't, or challenge me on it too. This is all about collaboration and our beliefs. So yeah, challenge me on it if you like. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So the power of preferences. Now, we all have preferences, right? We've all got them. So I've got a set of preferences. You guys will have a set of preferences. We've all got them. And this is important to realize. Now, if we know what the other person's preference is about something, and in this context, let's talk about communication or behavioral preferences, then we can adjust what we do to fit better with them. And the example I want to give you is a bit of a funny one. But many years ago, I had a friend coming to visit me, and she was staying at my place. And I said to her, hey, random question, what do you like for breakfast? And she said, oh, just toast or something, toast and some peanut butter. Yeah, all good. And I said, okay, cool. Yeah, no worries. And it was months before she came, and I just asked this random question. Anyway, time went past, and she was there, and she came over, she stayed, we got up in the morning. I said, okay, let's have some breakfast. And I went to the cupboard, and I didn't have any peanut butter. I only had Vegemite. So at this point, I had a couple of decisions that I could make, a couple of options I could take. The first would be to sort of just go, here you go, here's some Vegemite toast. Yeah. And see what happened. In that case, it might be a bit weird because she knows that I know her preference is peanut butter, but I just sort of don't really think about that, or I don't communicate to her that I know it, and I'm not able to communicate to her, or I'm not able to provide to her preference. And that might be a bit odd. Or I could say, look, I don't have any peanut butter. Is Vegemite okay? She goes, oh yeah, that's fine. That's okay, no problems. And that's perhaps a slightly better interaction when it comes to that situation. And so we can apply the same sort of ideas to our behavioral preferences or our communication preferences. Yeah? If we know the other person's preferences, we can cater to it. We can adjust, we can adapt, like I did in that situation. I realized that I couldn't cater to her preferences, and I engaged her in a conversation. I said, "Oh, I can go down to the shops and get you some. I can, give you something else. I've got jam, maybe, but if I just sort of soldiered on and didn't address it, there might be a bit of an awkwardness about it, right? So this is a funny example, but we can use the same kind of theory when we're talking about people's interpersonal preferences. So sometimes people tell me, well, of course, I couldn't have peanut butter because I'm allergic to peanuts. It's like, well, yeah, okay, that's cool. That's a bit more than a preference. You prefer not to have peanut butter because it's highly dangerous to you. Whatever the preference is, wherever the preference comes from, if we know about it, we can use that information to have a better interaction with somebody. All right, making sense so far? Let me know if I've lost anyone. So, why do we focus on our own preferences? Um, Essentially, it's because preferences are a two-way street. We've all got them. Yeah. And what we're observing in other people is a perception of that person or a perception of their behavior. So, not only have we got our own preferences, but we are working really heavily on perception. What we perceive to be happening, or where we perceive that person's behavior to be coming from. So we've all got that, and as we're communicating out, that other person is doing the same thing to us. They're perceiving how we're communicating. They're making decisions. They're making judgments about that perception. So if we really focus on knowing our own preferences and how those actually project out into the world, then we can control that a little bit as well. We can influence that, and hopefully those two things together, adjusting to that person's preferences and displaying that, leads to a better interaction. Now, it's really tempting to forget that we've got preferences too, that it's, something for other people around us to think about, that we don't have to worry about it. It's, oh, well, what are those people's preferences? Okay, what's Joe from accounts preference around communication? Oh, he likes direct communication. Okay, cool. Great. But if I have a natural preference to not be a direct communicator, it's likely that I'm going to have to really try hard to communicate in a direct fashion with Joe from accounts because it is not my natural preference. So if I'm not aware of that, when I try and have interactions with him or her from accounts, then it might be a bit like it might be perceived a bit strangely, or they might be thinking, "Wow, what's Nick doing? Where's that coming from?" If I haven't thought about the interaction between my own preference and the preference I'm adapting to. All right, everyone's really quiet, so I'm going to assume that's all good. So, why is knowing preference important? Why is it useful? It allows you to connect with people in, ways that you're not used to doing or that you don't usually do. If you understand a preference, you can also use that as a kind of a higher purpose for having a discussion about things. You can get a better idea of how you're being perceived by other people. You can capitalize on the strengths of your team as well. If you know their preferences, then you can really hone in on that, and that makes work a lot easier. But important for us as coaches, it really allows us to have a free flowing coaching conversation, a coaching relationship that's based on good communication. That allows us to do that. And as coaches, the onus is slightly more on us, I think, to adapt to the other person's style. Yeah. In workplace situations, I would sort of say, yes, it's two-way street. We should meet in the middle kind of thing. But as a coach, you're there to do a particular thing, which is to support that person. So we really need to try hard to make the changes that we can to have a better coaching interaction. All right. Does anybody know what the 4 DISC styles are? Pop them in the chat box, little spot quiz. Does anyone know what they are? No? All right, cool. So here are the 4 main styles, and this is where DISC comes from. It's dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. Now, I've used this with birds before, because sometimes it helps people in a visual who are visual to understand it a bit more. So I encourage you to do that as well if you're talking to people about it. Um, so you've got like an eagle, a peacock, a dove, and an owl. DISC. Okay, these are the 4 styles, and I'm going to quickly show you what they are, and then we're going to look at how can't talk. It's Friday. How we would adjust our coaching to suit that style. All right, so the dominance, the eagle. These are the really direct style. You know, they're decisive, they're really competitive, quite demanding. This is how they come across. This is their behavior. They're fast thinkers. They really like getting things done. They're very goal oriented, and they like to be in control of situations. Yeah. So people often say, oh, this is like a CEO kind of person, or this is like a finance director. And yeah, maybe that's true. It could be true. But equally, we need to be careful that we're not sort of pigeonholing or stereotyping people into a style based on what they do, yeah, based on their role. Okay, this is their preferences. Any preference can do any role. Um, just how much on do that is the issue. So the dominant style, yeah, decisive, go-getter, you know, and if you think about the eagle, often flies high and takes a wide view of things and then zooms in and gets stuff done. Yeah. So when they're under pressure a little bit, they can come across as not having too much concern for other people. And their fear is losing that control. So they like to have that control. You might be thinking, oh, I know an eagle or two based on their behavioral profile, which is okay. That's totally fine. Influencer, so influence, the peacock. These are the really sociable, talkative, you know, very energetic kind of people. These are the people who come in the office in the morning and go, hey, everybody, good morning. How are you? How was your night? What do you get up to? You know, chatty. They're really people oriented, very people oriented, actually, quite spontaneous. They're driven by emotion a lot. They'll really tune into what people might be thinking or feeling. Um, they're quite sort of emotional from that perspective. It's not about them being emotional, it's about them being attuned to emotion. Um, Under pressure, the I style can get a bit disorganized. You know, when they've got a bit on, they just kind of go, I've got too much on. And the biggest fear is social rejection. In this case, it talks about being disconnected from other people around them. You know, they like that connection with people. So the I style. And I mean, have a look at that bird. You know, it's it's really out there, isn't it? It's out there, kind of going, oh yeah, look at I style for sure. The dove. So I always get a real calm sense when I see this picture, the steadiness style of the dove. These are the calm, careful, very patient sort of style. You know, good listeners, very trustworthy. You know, they're the ones who kind of sit back. They're persistent but not pushy. You know, they're very calm. They'll take things step by step by step. Um, they'll just take it as it comes. They're just very they've got a steady pace to them, a steadiness to them. Um, Quite quiet. You know, they're not the I style who's out there. These are the ones who might be sort of taking the back seat a little bit. If you've got a meeting, they might be sitting sort of back from it, not necessarily putting themselves in the spotlight. Yeah, these are the sort of quiet achievers. Under pressure, these guys will take too much on. You know, these people will take too much on, or they'll do too much. You know, they'll go, "Oh, okay, you're pressuring me. All right, I'll just do it." Um, their biggest fear is a loss of stability. You know, they like that stability. They like the consistency that they create. So if you take that away, that's going to really affect the S style. The last one is conscientiousness. And I have seen this named differently, but the way I talk about it is conscientiousness. The owl, very precise, rule following, very logical, quite formal, you know, quite structured in what they do. Um, they're very analytical. They need that data. You know, they need to know all the details, all the nitty gritty details about things. They really do it. And when I say it's a need, it is a need. It's not a want, it's a need. They really need that to make sense of a situation. Yeah. This style will always do things correctly. Yeah, they'll always do things correctly. If you've got a procedure, these guys are following it for sure, because that's their style. You know, they follow the rules. Under pressure, they can get a little bit too critical. You know, one of the things that can happen is they get a bit too critical because they start sort of going into their strength, which is the data and what's wrong and all that sort of stuff. Their fear is criticism of their work because they put so much effort into it that it's hard for them to have their work criticized. So it's important that we don't criticize their work when we're dealing with a conscientious person. But doesn't not to say that we can't give feedback, but we just want to be not critical. Has anyone got one that they think they are? I'll skip back so you can see. What do you think your style is? And there's no right or wrong answer, but let me know in the chat box what you think your style is. You know, is there one that jumps out at you? There often is. Okay, Catherine says a C. Yep. Tanya, steadiness, conscientiousness. Yeah, and it's quite common to have a combination of styles. Jill says the owl. Okay, cool. Nice. And there's 4 boxes here, right? So we can't just say, okay, well, the whole world falls into 4 boxes. It's common that people have a variety of styles, but you will have a strong preference for one or the other. And when we do the psychometric, it rates it, and it will give you 1, 2, 3, 4 in order of strength. And there's often a clear winner, followed up quite closely by a secondary characteristic. Then the third and fourth are quite different, like a way away. So that's not uncommon. All right, so this is how they kind of relate. So you've got the DISC here, obviously, and left to right is about affiliation, and that just means how much proximity they need, how close they need to feel to other people. Yeah, so the D and the C styles are quite happy not necessarily working with other people. They don't need that in their life. They can do it, but they don't need it. Whereas on the other side, the I and the S style, they have a high need for affiliation. They want to be connected to other styles. So that's kind of over there on this side. Top to bottom, you've got control. So how much they need to control situations. So the D and the I style, they have a high need for control. They really want to be in control. And the C and the S have a low need for control. They're happy to adapt to situations. Does that sound right for all of you guys who kind of nominated a style? Does that sort of sound right to you? It usually does for people. All right. So one might jump out at you. And you also might start to identify these traits in your colleagues and friends too. Go back into the office and go, oh, there's a peacock, there's an owl, there's an eagle. It does happen. Now that you start seeing, it's like when you're looking at buying a new car, you see that car everywhere. So I invite you to really proactively have a look. Try and work out what style are your colleagues, are your family, are people that you work with. All right. So how do we take all of this and put it into the context of using it in our coaching work or in our conversations that we're having with people? Now, for me, DISC is a really useful framework for kind of staying out of the rut. I don't know about you guys when you're coaching, but because we've all got our own preference, we tend to fall back to that preference because it's comfortable for us. And we think, okay, well, to do a good job for them, I've got to be super comfortable. And I like to challenge that because actually, to do a good job for them, we need to be communicating as best as we can. And sometimes that means adjusting our style. So, really thinking about the other person and their preferences helps me sort of stay out of that sort of one track that I tend to go into. So the coaching tools are really good, right? Like so grow, adapt, all those things that we talk about in the Cert 4, they're all really great. But how do we communicate that with people? That's what we're talking about today. So we can change our words to customize our message as well. So if we've got a style that, say for example with learning preferences, if there's a visual person, that they're a visual person, you would say, instead of saying, to phrase a question, you might say, what do you see as the options? See visual. Yeah. Um, if you were working with someone who was kind of kinesthetic, you'd say, what do you feel are the right options? So a similar way here, we're going to use our knowledge of the style to adapt our question. And sometimes it might be about the words or it might be about the tone. Yeah. So with a direct style, we might go, so what are you going to do? Yeah. With an I style who's highly relational, you go, so what do you feel is the right thing to do? just slightly different, but for the person receiving that, if they're one of those styles, they'll receive it vastly differently. And the last point here, we can change our movement, tone, wording based on them. So movement is an interesting one. Body language, yeah. Our relational styles, who really are attuned to the other person in the conversation, will be looking at that. They'll be looking at that because that's how they make a decision about the other person, right? And about the topic. So you might want to mimic them, or amp up your body language. And a little warning here, I guess, that sometimes, depending on your style, these tips that I'm about to show you might be easier or harder. Yeah. Some might sound obvious, some might sound a bit out there, a bit ridiculous even, but that's just your preferences at play. That's all it is. Yeah. So remember that as we go through. All right. So the D style, the direct style. Above all, make sure you're ready and prepared. Yeah, because they will be. And if you're not, they'll see that as a kind of as a weakness, and they'll kind of go, okay, this person's not really up to speed here, not really kind of who I want to do work with. Um, Set expectations. Be clear with people. I love this. Be brief, brilliant, and then go. These guys don't like the fluff. They're direct styles, right? So ask really direct questions, such as, why does that matter? What's the impact to the business? Really short, sharp, to the point questions. D styles like that briefness. You don't want to get D styles thinking about their emotions and how do they make you feel, and what are the impacts. They're not really attuned to that. So if you ask them those questions, it's going to fall flat a little bit and perhaps frustrate them. So yeah, D styles, short, sharp, you know, pointy almost questions. They'll often respond very well to that. I guess the clarity is important. Yeah. Directness. Think about direct questions. And one at a time as well. Ask one question at a time to a D style, because they'll likely go, well, which question do you want me to answer? Hey, how are you? Are you okay? What's been happening? There's three questions. You go, how are you? Are you okay? What's been happening? So little tips there, just little adjustments that we can make that will make a big difference to them. Here's the I style, yeah? Um, Keep your coaching focused and confirm their accountability. The I style is not great at detail. Yeah. So we want to make sure that we're keeping that I style focused on the thing that we're dealing with. Restate it, addressed a short attention span. Not every eye style has a short attention span, but many do. Ask these really powerful questions that get them to go deeper under the surface, because they're already doing that already. They're already thinking about that stuff. So if you ask them, they'll have a lot of reference material to give you, a lot of depth to what they're thinking about will come out in the conversation. Body language is important here with the I styles because they're very relational. Um, and make sure you're coaching in a nice sort of sincere environment, really warm, empathetic, that sort of thing. You really want to make sure that you're partnered with them, right alongside them, and that they feel that that's what's happening. That's super important. So questions, how does that make you feel? How might you relate better to this situation? So you might ask them about the feelings, about the people, about relationships. Focus on them, yeah, because they're all very relationally driven. So ask them questions about the relationships that are relevant to the topic that they've asked you to coach on. Let me know as we go through if these are sounding right. If you're that style, is this how you'd like to be coached, or the things that you'd like your coach to think about? Okay, so the S style, respect their thought process and behavior. They might take notes. Often they will take notes, actually. They'll be writing things down because they like the detail. They're accuracy driven, they're data driven, detail driven. If they're giving things that are based on their own assumptions, it's good to challenge that. Explore those decisions or the opinions that they're giving you. If you're giving a homework, which I don't really encourage to do, to be honest, in coaching, but if you are going to give some homework, make it bite-sized and detailed. It's got to be really specific. They've got to really know what you're asking them to do. Go slowly with an S style. Match their pace of their thinking. Yeah. Questions like what other options might exist or how else could you view the situation are good for an S style because they challenge the S style to think about it. And the S style has the desire to do that thinking. Yeah. Focus around detail. Yeah, because they love detail. So focus in on detail. That'll help them. All right, and the last style, and a couple of slides from the end as well. We'll run a little bit over time. Let's see how we go. So the C style, be patient. Yeah, be patient. Don't play down the quality of their work. Remember I said that they didn't like criticism around their work. Um, make sure there's clear explanation about things and ensure that you're both on the same page. Yeah, that's important. Spend some time to, make sure that you're both viewing things from the same perspective. Give them things in factual terms. Don't spin it. Don't try and sell it. Just give them the whole explanation from where to go. Give them the whole bit of information. And sometimes this is a bit frustrating. I find for me, I'm an I style. In case that wasn't obvious, I'm an I style, and detail is not my thing, right? So I go, I'm going to explain this whole thing to you when actually I just really need you to understand this bit in the middle. I'm like, oh, gee, I don't want to have to explain the whole thing. But this style really needs it. So if you ask them just to focus on the bit in the middle, but you don't explain what happened before and why it's important and what the options might be afterwards, they kind of won't be able to think it through. So yeah, that's my preference coming out going, oh, gee, I don't want to have to give you all this detail because I hate detail, but you need it. So yeah, give them the whole thing. They will notice if you make a mistake. They absolutely will, because that's what they do. And that's okay. So be ready for that as a coach. And that's all right to make mistakes, but they'll pick it up and they'll often say, no, you've got that wrong. Or no, I didn't say that. Or no, that's not what I meant. So just view that as an opportunity to get clearer. Don't view it as a criticism. Just take it as a way for you to get more clarity. Yeah. So when we're talking to them, invite them to explore you know their really true need to understand things. Ask questions that dive a little bit. So like, what other information do you need? What else would help you understand? Those sorts of things. And focus on them and what they need. Yeah, focus on what they need because they will tell you. Catherine says, I agree. I'm guessing that means you agree with this is how you'd like to be communicated with. So um, that's how we use it. That's how we use disc, and it's a really quick, it's half an hour, guys. It's not a lot of time, but half an hour looking at this idea of how we use what we know about people to affect our coaching and to have a better coaching conversation and a better coaching outcome is really important. It's really important. I'd love to hear your thoughts. A little challenge for you before you head off. Give me one thing that you've taken away from today's session. Type it out into the chat box. What's one thing that's jumped out, or one thing that you're going to do next, or one thing that you're going to try? Let me know in the chat box. Cool. So I've got some messages coming through. Nicky says, "Thanks, Nick. I really like using language that suits the style." Yeah, it's really it's a good way to go. Just subtly adjusting, taking a gut decision sometimes as well. Going, I think this will be better if we say it like this. Try things. Yeah. Gillian says she's going to try and guess what people are. Yep, great. Francesco says, what if the coachee is not willing to do disc? Okay, so you don't necessarily have to have the coachee do the disc profile to get this information. If you have a think about the way they show up, the way that they interact with you, the things they say, the way they behave, you'll probably be able to get a sense of which style they are. And you can then test if that's right by adjusting your style to meet the style that you think they are. And if it does, you should see a better response from them. You don't have to get them to do the disc profile. You absolutely don't have to. It can be good to do it, but you don't have to. And you could even take something, if you do a Google for like, what are the disc styles, you'll get a list like the ones that I just put up on the screen. And you could sit down with someone and say, hey, which one do you think is you? And they'll be able to tell you. And that might be enough. Yeah. Or you can go the whole hog and do the disc profile, but you don't have to. Yeah, I hope that helps you, Francesco. I hope that's great. Ken says he's going to customize the questioning so as to give the best outcome for the coachee. Yeah, brilliant. Really, really good. And don't change the question you're going to ask, because if you pick a question, you will be able to kind of just you will have picked that question because it's going to do something for the conversation. So we're not going to change the question. We're going to change the intention of the question. We're going to change the words or the way that we deliver it to better suit the person. The intention will be the same. But Catherine says, just wonder how to adapt to other people's styles. I understand how to identify their style. Following these directions you presented is definitely one way, but I guess there is also body language tone. It would require some practice on being a chameleon. Yeah, to a certain extent it does. It's all trial and error as well. Remember that we're talking about perception a lot of the time, right? So we just want to, the more we know somebody, the more accurately we can take a guess at what their style is, and how we adjust. So I know I'm an I style predominantly. I like to talk in big kind of terms and vision and all that sort of stuff. But if I'm talking with a detailed person, I know that I have to go from explain the whole thing and how great it's going to be for people and go, these are the key deliverables I need to talk about. Yeah. So I need to, instead of kind of going on a big picture, thing, I need to go, okay, you're a D style. So what you want to know is something really short and sharp. So how do I do that? And it's just me going, okay, they're just going to want dot, dot, dot. They're going to want dot points, whereas my preference would be to have a conversation. Yeah. And actually, for me as an I style, this comes out quite a lot because a lot of the time, in dealing with people who call in and make inquiries about what we do here at Open Door, my preference is to have a good conversation with them. Yeah, because I'm an I style, I'm highly relational. But a lot of the time, people just kind of want to do it by email, and that's okay. That's all right. It's not my preference, but I can do it. Yeah. So this kind of identifies for us that it's about preference, not ability. Yeah. So our preference is to do something a certain way. It doesn't mean we can't do it in a different way. Yeah. So we just adjust. We just adjust. And sometimes people will say, no, I don't want to make it. I don't want to call you. I don't want to have a phone conversation. Just tell me by email. It's like, okay, cool. And I can, but I really have to think about how I will do that, and how I'll do it effectively to best suit them because it's not my natural preference. But with practice, it becomes easier. Yeah. So it's those sorts of things, Catherine. We take a bit of an educated guess about what might work best for the other person, and then we practice. We try things on. Yeah, we see what works, and we can also just ask the person. Let's not overcomplicate it. Say, how do you like to get information? How do you like me to communicate with you? Are you more direct, or do you want to kind of explore things a bit, or what works for you? Simple just question to ask them. Some people will know for sure, some people won't, but having these skills or this knowledge helps us decide as well. You're welcome, Catherine, not a problem. All right, any other questions for me there? All right, it looks like everyone's asked their questions. We are a little bit over time, so there's no more content for today. So if you want to jump off, you certainly can. I'm here to answer any questions you've got. Don't forget to check out on the website the Mental Health First Aid course. It's a really brilliant 2-day course that really gives people solid mental health literacy skills. So I'd absolutely encourage you to check that out, particularly if you're working with people or you're in that sort of HR space and you're responsible for people. Um, the statistics around mental health are quite amazing. 1 in 5 people in Australia will experience some kind of mental health illness every year. So if you're working with 5 people, statistically, 1 of them is. So this course actually helps you understand how best to support them. So I encourage you to check that out. Francesco says, awesome. Thank you so much. Great timing as I have a client who is a bit of a challenge. Okay. Yeah. Use these skills and happy to have a chat with you as well, Francesco, if you want. Give me a call and we can sort of talk it through and work out a plan. Happy to help you with that. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks everybody. Guys, if you're currently or previously enrolled in our Cert 4, don't forget we have our Tuesday night study sessions on Zoom, 7:30. So jump on the Facebook group and you'll be able to join in on those. I'll see you guys next Tuesday, and next week the Coaching Cafe is taking a break because it's a grand final public holiday here in Melbourne. Um, Views on that vary, but anyway, I'm having the day off, so we won't have a coaching cafe next week, but we'll be back in a fortnight's time. Thanks again. It's Nick here from Open Door Coaching. Have a great afternoon, everybody.